Couple of subjects we're going to cover today. So first of all, we're looking where to look for roles and looking at job descriptions and whether or not they're suitable for an application for you. We'll talk a bit about your CV, your LinkedIn profile, and your portfolio and how they all connect to one another. We'll touch on interview technique and we'll discuss how to prepare accurately for an interview. And that can cover any interview, whether it's first, second, third, fourth, final. We'll talk about confidence and resilience, which again actually resonates with interview prep, actually, I think most of all. And then we'll talk a little bit about there's some interview questions we can go over, and we'll do a bit of Q&A as well. Um, so so first of all, where should you be looking for a job? Now, I'm sure most of you would have seen all of these. Indeed is an aggregate that takes job vacancies from all over the website, all over the internet, sorry, scrapes them all together and puts them in a list. On Indeed, what I'd be doing is rather than searching for games-centric words like game designer, or I would be focusing really on skill. So if you're a developer, I'd be looking at putting in things like Unity, C Sharp, or Unreal Engine, or if you're a game designer, talking about documentation or blueprints or something like that, rather than always the job title, because Indeed takes jobs from all over the UK, and also takes jobs from non-game sectors as well. So there might be some jobs there that are relevant to you outside of games that are working on games adjacent projects. So it's quite good tactics. Gamesjobs.live, gamesjobs.biz, Tiger, Games Jobs Direct, and then we've got Amiqus.com there. We've got all of our jobs are live on our website. But there's a few other agencies, Aardvark Swift, Skill Search, those companies, they have their adverts on there as well. So you can also tend to set up job alerts so that any job that comes up, you get alerted via email about it. So all of those, I think, should be quite familiar to you. Um, on the right there, you'll see Games Map UK, LinkedIn, and Studio websites. So those Indeed job adverts, those are jobs that are already live. Those are job adverts that are live, that it's been agreed that there's a job application, job vacancy there, and you can apply to it, and it's quite a normal process. On the right, Games Map, LinkedIn, Studio websites. This is a bit more of a longer term way and strategy to develop your own network within LinkedIn of potential future employers, and also trying to find jobs before they're advertised. So if you type into Google the UK Games Map, UKIE Games Map, it's an interactive map of all the UK members in the UK. Um, Zoom in to where you live and then start zooming out until you see little dots on the map. And those are all members of UK. And what you'll find is, as well as the sort of usual suspects of games industry companies you've heard of, with big profiles or big IP, what you'll find a lot of studios that you've never heard of. Companies that support the industry, companies that are third party developers or maybe outsourcers. These companies don't always get the traffic of applicants that you might get if you were, say, a big AAA IP holder, but still have job opportunities and would welcome direct applicants. Um, what I would also do is, so you'd find those people on the map, look at their website and see if they've got any vacancies live. Now, if they don't, but if they're local to you, with a lot of people preferring people hybrid at the moment, what I would then do is, if they're not advertising anything, I would go on LinkedIn, find the company on LinkedIn, follow their company page, and then I would look at the leadership there. So you might look at someone who's an internal recruiter for this company. If you're an audio designer, you might look at their audio director, art director, design director, and so on. And what you want to do is connect with these people. And over time, what you'll end up doing is building a really relevant, strong network of potential employers. A lot of companies at the moment, given that there's a lot of candidates on the market, they will go to LinkedIn first to advertise that they're looking for somebody. And if you follow them and you're connected with them, that should pop up on your feed straight away. So it's a really good way of getting access to a role that hasn't really or been advertised. A lot of times roles exist within companies 3 to 6 weeks before they're advertised. They look, they get green lit, they talk to internal applicants, they talk to people that internally people know, their network, and then they might put it on LinkedIn and say, before we advertise, is anyone interested in this role? So on the left, you've got a very reactive, there's a job advert, you can apply, very standard. And on the right, you've got a strategy using the Games Map, LinkedIn, and their websites to really plot out the studios that you could most likely work for in your next job move. And also long term, if this happens again, you've then got already a built-in network of people that should be in a position to hopefully potentially offer you a job if they are hiring. So that's where you should be looking. If you found a role and you think you should apply, what should you do? So a lot of people are firing a lot of applications, and before we go into the application process, make sure if you are actively looking, you are keeping a track of every application you're making. Excel spreadsheet, studio name, the role name, the date of application, and obviously any outcome. This stops you over applying to any studios, and also if you get contacted by a recruiter, you can then avoid any duplications, which is, a bit of a red flag for some people. So yeah, just keep a track of it. And also it's a really good way of going back to the top of that list after a certain amount of time, finding the people that you've applied to and then just giving them a nudge and saying, hey, did you fill that role? I'm still available. Would you be open to a chat? So it's a really good way of just keeping track of things. So should you apply to a job, you might think, well, yes, I'm out of a role, but first of all, check the company out. Look at Glassdoor, look at their social channels. I know studios now have things like podcasts and blogs and things like that. Do they match the values that you have? Are they a studio that you would want to work for? Whether you're out of work or not, if you are out of work, it can make you a bit more, well, it doesn't matter, I need to pay the bills, which is more than understandable. But is that sustainable? So if you can try and apply to those companies that you would have applied anyway, that's even better. Doing the research of the studio before you apply, it helps you make the application tailored. What's really going to appeal to this company about your experience? Is there anything from the company's social media that you can look at in your own profile and say, actually, I've got a bit of experience in, I don't know, racing games or open world RPG. I can mention that. And it also will help you in interview as well, which we'll come to later. So look at the job spec carefully. Now, you want to make sure that your application is really relevant. If you quite early on in your career and you're applying for CEO jobs, probably not the right thing to do. So make sure it's relevant. You want to get it as close to your own skills and your relevant deployable skills as possible. And my advice to that would be that most job adverts are often big, long, bullet pointed descriptions of the ideal candidate, and they'll have things in there that just aren't all available in one person. So my advice would be look to the first two or three, and that should have pretty much game designer, console experience, racing game or something like that, and you should be able to ascertain whether or not you're really hitting those two out of three of the first top bullet points of a job advert. Um, if you continue reading, then they'll start listing all the things that most hiring managers will be like, oh, if they had this, it'd be great. If they had this, it'd be great. And that is really a wish list of the perfect candidate. So my advice to you is don't be put off by applying if, and this is especially true, research has shown to females that they go down a job description and eventually by the end talk themselves out of applying because they feel they don't hit everything in that list. Look at the top two or three. That should be the sort of language that they're using, or maybe the years of experience to a degree, um, maybe the kind of games that you've worked on. If you've hit them, then your application is, it's relevant. So definitely get that application in. But if you're not hitting those basic requirements, probably look for something else, or maybe reach out to the studio directly and say, I saw this role, wasn't quite what I'm looking for, but do you have anything more along the lines of this? And I think that would be better than making an application that wasn't right. But don't be put off either. It's a difficult line to tread, but try and make sure they're as relevant as possible. Um, so we're going to talk about CV and we're going to talk about portfolio and LinkedIn. So when you think about your CV, there's some real basics there. Contact details. This still happens in this day and age with people leaving their contact details off. Completely put them in. Any skills that you've got, you want them to be searchable, you want them as keywords on your CV and put them in. You can have a list of skills, list of software on your CV. Try and make it as easy to read as possible. Platforms and engines, all those kind of tangible facts of your experience you want in there. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, you want to make it as explicit as possible to the person reading your resume that you've got this experience. So don't just assume that they will know that your studio uses Unreal or that your studio has worked on this type of game. Really make it as explicit. So if you're a game designer with a studio that's working on, an open world RPG with, medieval art style, then put that in. If it's cross-platform or if it's PC, put that in there so that it's really explicit. Don't assume that people know anything about the job that you do. And that'll make sure that you're not getting overlooked because something's been left off a CV. So those things include software, platforms and engines, and the responsibilities that you had. So when you're talking about the job that you're doing, talk about your day to day and break it down for you. I guarantee you that there'll be things that you do day to day naturally that you just forget are a part of a job. So try and break down your day into little nuts and bolts and be like, what exactly do I do? And give it as much granular detail as possible, as long as it's relevant. Um, Give details about those things. So a good example would be if you're a producer or a project manager, you wouldn't say, oh, I've shipped, two games and on PC and console. You would say, you've shipped two titles. It was, a multi-platform RPG. This was the team size. This was the budget. This was the length of time that it took me. I used Agile. I used Scrum or whatever sort of work, sort of buzzwords or kind of strategies that you use. And you had, say, three direct reports. So you've broken it down into tangible facts that you know are relevant and true. And that is the kind of detail you need to have on a CV. You also need to talk about anything that you did outside of your day-to-day job. So whether or not, so again, going back to say a game designer role, did you lead a feature team? Were you responsible for a segment of a game? Were you responsible for prototyping a new sort of a new game, a new concept that you had? Did you mentor anybody? Now that's not in your day-to-day job, but it's a part of your wider studio level role. Um, did you go to any events on behalf of the company? Did you go to any pitches for a publisher? So those kind of things need to be in that description of the job as well. Make sure the dates are on there that you've worked that you've worked at the company, from and until. Don't just go with years. Go with like April 2022 to present or whichever. And if you can, give a line on why you left. You can just even put RFL, reason for leaving, redundancy or whatever it was in your case. Um, so the CV needs to be detailed. Avoid any verbose narrative feeling type CVs. So what I would avoid is when you have a role description, say, oh, I joined here in 1997 to take care of this, then I was promoted to this. It's okay to give a bit of a narrative, a bit of a story. Really, it needs to be that bullet pointed, tangible facts about the job, plus anything you did outside of your day to day. Avoid any pictures on your CV. You don't have to give any marital status or anything like that. You don't have to give your age. And do include hobbies. I saw something on Twitter or LinkedIn about not including hobbies, and I think in games especially, it's really important to put anything that adds a bit of color to your experience. So if you're a dungeon master for a D&D campaign, if you're a Twitch streamer, or even if you're just into crafting, I don't know, bespoke skateboards, whatever it is, try and add something in there. It's great. It gives the interviewer something to talk about and just makes your CV a little bit more memorable. So hopefully that's all fairly common sense, but yeah, try and keep that CV nice and relevant. Formatting your CV. So try not to have it too overly designed. It is a document with information on. It can look nice, but try and keep it really simple, really nice size font. Avoid any pie charts or graphs to show how experienced you are in something. Avoid any sort of like cartoonish avatars, those kind of things. It's not really a personal preference, it's just how relevant it is. It won't make it stand out. You want to make it as easy to decipher and read as possible. So yeah, and proofread it, use a professional email address, it's a classic. And a good thing for your CV is give it to someone who doesn't know what you do. So like a cousin, a mum, parent, whatever. Give it to someone who doesn't really understand what you do and say, what do you think I do here? How does it read? Because they won't know what to look for and what not to look for. And they might find a bit of an error or might ask you a question. You're like, oh, actually, yeah, I didn't put that in because I thought everyone knew. So give it to someone who's out of games or maybe different disciplines, something like that. Proofread it, yeah, and don't have any gaps. So you've got your CV, you've found a job that you want, you've got your CV all nice and looking nice. So how do you send an application? So use whichever is their preferred method of application. So if it's apply here website and you attach a CV to it and you fill in some details, whatever their preference is, the studios, I would do that if I were you. You can send a cover letter if they ask for it. it's often sometimes you might have to also give a bit of a paragraph about yourself. Again, try and avoid any narrative. This is, I fell in love with games when I was 3 and I got this Mega Drive and then I've done this and that's interesting, but tell that interview. What I would do in this instance is it's almost like a pitch for yourself. So, this is my name, this is my situation. I've recently been working here at X, working on this project. I'm ideally looking for this kind of role. Here's my availability. And you can even put salary details in there if you want to, if you feel comfortable with that. And again, put your contact details in. So make it punchy, make it pertinent, avoid any sort of verbose storytelling, but just try and give a quick snapshot as to what your situation is at the moment, where you're located, and if that role is hybrid that you're applying for, can you get there? Is it, would you have to relocate? And those kind of details would be quite interesting. And keep a good record of applications, which we've covered already. So before we move on to portfolios, I just want to cover LinkedIn. LinkedIn, like it or loathe it, is a really, really good tool. A, to be discovered, and B, to discover opportunities and connect with people that might have the opportunities that you're looking for. So with LinkedIn, your LinkedIn should really be an accurate reflection of your CV. You can just copy and paste the details in it if you feel that you're happy, with that level of detail. Sometimes there's some private stuff on there, or stuff that's not publicly available about studio or something like that. But try and make sure that your CV is really well reflected in your LinkedIn, and vice versa. And the reason for that is that recruiters and people who are on LinkedIn to use it as a recruitment tool will search via keyword. So a classic is, on LinkedIn, is people put in something like witty or funnier for their job title, which isn't searchable. Your job title should be fairly universal on your CV and on your LinkedIn profile, because it's searchable. And the reason you want keywords and things like that in your LinkedIn profile again is, and things like engines that you've used and types of games, that's exactly what recruiters search for. Recruiters have a different license for LinkedIn where it allows you to search for people through, almost like a database. So keep that LinkedIn profile up to date. And also put the open to work banner on. Again, there's been some discourse around whether it makes you look desperate or something like that. That is absolute rubbish. So I'll tell you for why. When I do a search on LinkedIn, I can click a button that instantly shows me everybody who's coming up in that search that is then open to opportunity. Now, as a recruiter, surely I would go to people straight away who are going to be more receptive to the job that I'm trying to offer them because they're open to work. So it is definitely something that you should do. In terms of content, put whatever you like out there on LinkedIn. People do check it, employers, so just have that in the back of your mind when you're posting something on there. People can see your comments and your posts, but yeah, be active on there. Put an accurate, up-to-date professional picture. Make sure your job title's accurate, and if you have been made redundant, you can update the about me sort of segment as a bit of a pitch. This is my situation, this is where I'm based, this is what I'm looking for. Whereas normally it would kind of give like a bit of a boring sort of like summary. You can have it as a bit of a pitch that you would typically send in a cover letter. So, and you can host your CV as a document and portfolio link on LinkedIn. So it's all in one place. It's really easy. So make sure both things are kind of accurately representing one another. Portfolios. So there's a lot of disciplines in games, and a lot of them have portfolios, some of them don't. So this will be quite a broad subject, but the key point to take away about portfolio is if your discipline typically has one, then you should have one. In art, animation, cinematics, tech art, anything, especially creative, visual, they will be looking instantly for somewhere that you've hosted some work, some ArtStation link or something. And often hiring managers won't even consider a candidate without it. Even unofficially, they might not say it, but they will kind of discount people. They will look, often art directors will look at your portfolio before they look at your CV. So it's really, really important. You can host a link on your CV and your LinkedIn. Make sure that that link works. Make sure it's easy to access, easy to navigate, and well annotated. So just want to talk about this annotation for one. On ArtStation or anything, you've done a YouTube video, maybe it's a show reel of animation, put some context in there. So was this work done, was this piece of work done on an unreleased title? What engine did you use? Who did you collaborate with? If you did a piece of work on your ArtStation that was a speed paint in a games jam, 2 years ago, is that the same as something that's a finished article of a character on a AAA game? Quality won't be the same, but if you put them without any context, they'll assume that that's just your level of work. So you need to put in context. So if you've collaborated with any artists, if there's any concept inspiration, you can even put things like pixel count. But if it's in a game jam, you can say, speed paint, this is what I did, really proud of it. And you can even say, a bit of reflection. If I had more time, I would do this, or this is my plan to do, and so on and so forth. So annotation and context is really key. And the best portfolios I've seen have always had a good level of that. Put your best work up front, the most relevant, the most recent, so that they can see what your current skills are like today, ASAP. Less is more, quality over quantity. If there's anything that you really don't believe is accurate, if it's university work from 5 years ago or something you just don't believe is accurately representing your skill, then take it out. But if you feel it represents your skill at a certain amount of time, a certain point in time, and you can show some progression, then keep it in. It's really all about context. I would also have a bit of like diversity of content's important. So if you've worked on nothing but, a sci-fi tactical shooter for 4 years, you're obviously going to be limited. But if there's any personal work, any sketches you've done, a lot of artists, for example, are into photography or something, you can put something else in there that's not like the professional work that you've done. And that shows the ability to be able to do different art styles and adapt to things. So it's easier said than done. I really appreciate that. You won't have time always to do it in your own time. But if you can put a diversity of, and I'm thinking again really about art here, about the style, that is really useful. And I know art directors do like to see that. Any tests you do in your application process, I would also put them in your portfolio as well. And that's whether or not it's, sound, animation, whatever. Any test you do, save it, put it somewhere accessible on your link on your portfolio. Even people save them under a segment called tests and have it there just because it shows you it's a really good way because here's the brief, this is what I did, this was the feedback. And you can even put in there, with more time I would have done X, Y, and Z. So it shows a bit of self-reflection. So really good. Include personal work, have someone look at your portfolio, ideally from the same discipline, but also maybe someone that works for a different company, maybe they've got different style of work. And also ask somebody who looks at portfolios, but maybe a different discipline. So maybe get an animation director to look at an art one and so on and so forth, and see what they take of it. See, they might say have some feedback that you just might never have thought before. Look for portfolios online of people that you really like. Go to a studio, find. I know there's a lot of companies and people that share their portfolios quite publicly on Twitter and things. Take a look at them, see what the kind of things they're doing that make it really stand out as being a good portfolio, and maybe even potentially reach out to them for some feedback as well. So yeah, use what's around you freely available to really inform your own portfolio. So CV, portfolio, and LinkedIn are all linked together. They should all reflect the same information, but just in different formats. Easy to navigate. Make sure it's obvious what you do. Make sure it's searchable, and use universally accepted language in terms of job titles. And if you've got acronyms and sort of different words that are very unique to your studio, try and take them out so that it's a bit more universally understood what it is you do. And especially for job titles, try and keep them as widely understood as possible. Yeah. Okay. Has anyone got any questions on CV, portfolio, LinkedIn, while we're on this subject? No? Okay. I can't see the questions anyway. So for interviews, this is probably the biggest sort of, I think, impactful thing that you can do as an applicant in today's industry, in today's landscape. It is competitive out there. So you've put everything together. You've found the right role. You've applied for it in a really nice tailored way. Your CV, your LinkedIn, your portfolio is all really nicely reflective of one another. It's got lots of content on there. So you've got the interview, which is great. This is where you want to be. It's also the worst part of job hunting. It's like a first date. It's really nerve-wracking. It's anxiety inducing, and you have to be on your best self. And I think especially if you're in a position where you need a job, they take on much, much more importance. And I think that can actually be a bit of a negative thing. Some nervous energy is good, gives you an edge, just a bit of jeopardy. But too much, I think, can lead people into being a bit anxious and over prepare as well. So we'll talk about a little bit what to do about interviews. So a couple of prerequisites. these should be an absolute given. Play the games. If you can't, if you don't have them, or you don't want to buy several £60 games, you can research them, look at playthrough, gameplay, reviews online, form two opinions, form your own opinion as a player, and form your own opinion from a discipline perspective. So you might love the game as a level designer. You might think, well, I think that could have been adjusted, or I think that would have been different. It's always good to bring that kind of information and thought to an interview, especially if you're interviewing for a level design role. They're going to ask you, what do you think of the game? Anything you can see that we can improve? What would you have done? Those kind of things. Form those two opinions. Um, Before the interview, ask about the interview. Who's going to be on it? What's it going to be? Is it going to be video? Is it going to be face to face? Both of those avenues offer different levels of preparation. Who you'll be meeting. Do your research. So if you're meeting three people, try and find them on LinkedIn, see where they've worked, see, if you've got any mutual connections, see what they do, and really read their profile and understand, what are they hiring this role for? Because it might not be your hiring manager, it might be someone that is adjacent to the role that you're doing. How is that person going to interact with this role in the studio? And that might add a different dynamic to the interview. Um, Things like know the location and journey. If it's face to face, make sure you can get there. What are the trains? What's the parking like? Um, and also, if it's on video call, make sure that your area, that your equipment works. Make sure that your internet's fine. Make sure that your headset's charged, and make sure the area background behind you is acceptable, and that that one noisy pet isn't going to be in the same room as your interview. So just try and give yourself every advantage to make sure it goes as smooth as possible. You'll see at the bottom it says ask for what you need to be successful. So um, this this is especially for neurodiverse people in mind. We had a situation of a candidate where they really struggled to hold eye contact during an interview, but they were really, really very capable candidate. So they told us that, and we spoke to the hiring manager. We said, look, we don't need any allowances, but just to let you know, this candidate struggles to hold eye contact, especially when they're thinking, and also goes a bit quiet when they're thinking. So it can initially can feel a bit strange. So can you just make sure the interviewers are aware of that? And anyway, the interview went really, really well. They got the job, and it not necessarily because of that, they were really good. But I do like to think that that definitely helped them succeed in that interview. We told them that we'd given them that prep as well, so that made them feel more confident going in. If you feel that you would, ask for some questions before you go in. Just say, are there any questions you can share with me that I'll be asked during the interview? If you say it in a nice way, then there's no real, even if they can't or they won't, there shouldn't be really any sort of hassle to you or them to even to have the conversation. And if you do have any, something that might, you do struggle with neurodiversity or something like that. If you can think of something that will help you, just ask the recruiter or the person arranging the interview for that. And they should be able to help you. So these are kind of things that you can do before the interview. Um, Interview questions. So you cannot you can you cannot know what they're going to ask you. You can if you ask and they tell you, but generally there'll be some questions that you won't know. But you all you can do is you can prepare the kind of answers that you give. So have a look at the job spec. Is there any standout requirement that you don't meet? So say, for example, you've worked in proprietary engines for years and they use Unreal. That's going to come up, isn't it? If is there any differences between your experience and the job spec, glaring that you can see? Be prepared to talk about those sort of blind spots, if you like. Um, be prepared to discuss your experience and specifically how it might be relevant to them. So, understand that the experience that you've got is really valuable. They have a need for someone with your skills and experience. So really be able to sell that, but be reflective on your own experience. What did you do in your role that made it successful? What did you do in your role that you're really proud of? Was there any big challenges that you faced? Was there any technical challenges that you overcame? Was there anything wrong with a live service game that for some reason dropped off daily average users and you were involved in that challenge? Really go back on your own experience and think about things that might come up in an interview that you think, oh, I'm really prepared to talk about that. If you do get asked a question that is situational based, so, can you give us an example where you've worked well as a team or where you've resolved a conflict in the workplace? Use the STAR method here at the bottom of the screen: situation, task, action, result. So it's a really good way of structuring your answer. And once you get into it, you'll find that you structure all your answers in interviews this way. So they might say, can you give me an example of where, you've managed a project that was kind of in rough times or on fire, and you've come in and you've changed something, and you've got it delivered on time. You would go in there and the situation would be, well, the project was behind budget, sorry, over budget, and it was behind schedule. And we'd also had some long-term people off long-term sick. I was tasked with going in there to make sure the team was skilled up, get them refocused, look at our processes, and ultimately get the project delivered. The action that I took was, I hired a contractor to fill the people that were off long-term sick. I spoke to the existing people about morale and about what we can change. I looked at processes. I asked for some external help, and as a result, we actually got the game, or the project out on time, albeit over budget, but it was out on time, and I was rewarded, or it was acknowledged that that was down to a large part of me. So in that star example, you want to be as specific as possible, and you want to break it down into this is the context, this is what I was tasked to do, this is what I did, and this was the result as a direct result of what of my actions. And the reason for that is that most people judge people's future behavior on past behavior. So if you can demonstrate that you've done this before, and you can also break it down into a nice piecemeal sort of understandable story and context, that will give them the confidence that if you've done it once in a games in studio, you'll be able to do it again. So yeah, really give yourself as much preparation as possible before going into interview, and be reflective on your own experience. Look at the STAR method. It's as old as the hills. It's well known. So there's a lot of research out there, a lot of good examples out there, and there's some at the bottom of this PDF as well, which I'll send to you that would be quite useful. So in the interview, and this is kind of what I want to talk about a lot, about mindset and about resilience and things like this. Often candidates, and this stems from junior right through to executive candidates, they often have it's daunting. Let's be honest, it's really daunting. You're going to be judged. You've got to put your best self on. And equally, you might not be in a really right frame of mind to do that. If you've been made redundant or you're going through that process, that is extremely stressful. How are you meant to give your best self in an hour when you're going through this, life-changing event externally? It's very, very difficult. So I think first of all, if you can acknowledge that, and really talk to yourself and say, can I give my best self in this interview? Now, if you can, that's great. But if you can't, are you able to just superpower yourself for that 1 hour? And it starts before. So confidence comes from preparation, especially in interviews. So go through all the preparation that we've done, play the games, YouTube videos, look at your own experience. But really tell yourself that this is an eye level meeting. These people are not above you in any way, shape, or form, apart from their length of service within their company. They need someone with your skills. This is a two-way street. This should not be, and it should not feel like an adversarial conversation whatsoever. You should be able to go in there and look at this person in the eye as a colleague. They might be more senior to you, but they're certainly not more superior to you. And it's about going in there with that understanding that they have a need, and admittedly, you have a need as well, but you also have the skills to fulfill that gap in their studio. So it's about having that confidence to be able to go into that room or go into the video call and carry yourself high. Couple of ways to do that. If your interview starts at 1 p.m., your interview to you starts at 12:30, quarter to one. Whatever it needs to do for you to have that physical energy to be able to bring that smile, bring that energy just for that hour. An interview like this is the absolute dream job of your life. That's what you need to do. So whether or not it's to go out for a quick walk, have some physical movement, whether it's just to take a break away from the screen, grab a quick coffee, or, a Red Bull or whatever drink, non-alcoholic, of course, that you need to get you in the spirit. And I'll give you one. When I do these calls, even if I'm at home and I'm nervous and no one's in the house or my wife's just there or something like that, I will go into my room. I'll take a minute out. I'll redo my hair. I'll even put on aftershave, even though hopefully no one can smell you through the computer, but even do that just to make sure I feel as confident in myself as possible going into this meeting. That's what I want to do, and that's what I want you to bring to any interview that you do. Even if you have to fake it, just try and find a tactic to do whatever you can do. Playing with a dog, playing with your children, quick blast on a video game for 15 minutes, whatever gets the blood pumping, whatever gets you feeling good and confident and knowing this is an eye level conversation, that's what you need to do. Um, So that preparation starts, and that is really about mental resilience, whatever you need to do it. The other thing you can do, so be yourself, obviously. With all that said, you still want to be authentic. I've had candidates, rejected for giving too polished interview answers. Try not over prepare every part of your answers so that you come across as inauthentic. Um, think about self promotion. So this comes back to mindset again. Sell yourself. Where can you add value to this person's studio? You know about game studios. You know how they're made. You know what part of a studio you can provide. You know what value you can add. Talk about that. Talk about working as a team, but really make sure you don't just be so selfless that you're like, oh, everyone else is brilliant and I just got carried along. Really talk about your own things that you physically did and the impact you can have. Say it as humbly as possible, of course, but make sure you back yourself in there. Um, and the other thing is be ready with the right kind of questions. Now, I believe good conversation comes from good questioning, and certainly good interviews do. The other person, they might, not everyone likes interviewing people, so they might not be the best interviewer, and they might have heard the same answers again and again and again all day. So how can we change that? And that comes from the questions that you can prepare to ask at the end. The worst case scenario in an interview is that it's gone really, really well, and you've prepared loads of questions and you've really prepared, you're in the right mindset. And they say to you, have you got any questions? And you have to say, no, because you've answered them all inadvertently during the course of the interview, which happens all the time. You'll go in filled with questions about the job, and they'll talk to you about the job for an hour, and you come away with no questions. So there's three questions that I always try and prepare candidates to try and ask. And hopefully the structure of those questions will give you some inspiration for some other questions. So this is where you want to be. You want to get that interviewer thinking about you in the job. So how I would structure these questions. So it's at the end of the interview, we can picture it. We've talked about it. We've had a really jolly time. So Alan, have you got any questions? I would say, yeah, if I was offered the job, so if you were to offer me this job between now and starting this job, what can I do to really hit the ground running? Now, the reason we've asked it in that way is you're getting them to picture you in the job. So you're not even thinking about them offering or giving feedback on your interview. You're getting them to picture you day one in the job. Also, what can I do to prepare so I can hit the ground running? So first of all, it looks great. That who doesn't want to hear that as a hiring manager? This person is absolutely on it. They want to nail this job. They want to make it successful. They give me the confidence that I'm going to pick the right person. But also, it's handy to know, right? So if they say, well, actually, you can play these 5 games that we're taking inspiration from, that's useful information. And you can mention it again in future interviews, oh, by the way, I did what, you know, I did what Judy said, and I've been playing this game, and I think this could really work, and so on and so forth. So it's really good information. Another question is, if you were to offer me this job, what if I was to start this job tomorrow, however you want to phrase it, what would be my biggest challenge? What do you think would be my biggest challenge? And really, what you're asking them there is, what are your kind of reservations about me, but without being as blunt as that. And again, you're getting them to picture you in the job. Now, they might say, well, you've used proprietary engine, and really, we're big in Unreal. We're really, really in depth with it. And, obviously, people have struggled with that in the past. Fair comment. What this then allows you to do is give an example of when you've last changed something technically that you've learned. So you can say, no, it is a big challenge. The last time I had to use a different engine, what I did was, I realized that quite quickly. We had the same sort of challenges. But what I did was I reached out to the evangelist within the studio. I reached out to someone who was well known as being, very technical within the engine. And I sat down with them for a couple of times to say, get me up to scratch with it. Or you might say, I looked at a tutorial on YouTube, or I've done this, I've spoke to this person, and so on and so forth. So you can ask a quite good question, get them to pitch you in the role. Also, it's relevant information, but then you can resell yourself to give them reassurance that you've faced that challenge before and that you've overcome it. One final question. If you were to offer me this job, if I was to take this role, however you want to phrase it, make sure it's conversational. How would you know that I've been a success in, say, 6 months? Like, what would you expect from me in, say, 6 to 12 months? What are your expectations going into this in terms of what you want to achieve? However you want to phrase it, ask that kind of question. So first of all, it's a good question to ask for you, because if they say, oh, we don't want much, we just want you to rewrite the whole game and launch it yourself and everything, you're like, hold on, red flag. But also, it's a really good conversation because they might say, well, what we'd really love you to do is be able to, get this kind of these amount of assets out with like the pipeline in this kind of condition. We're aiming for this milestone in 6 months, so we'd really like your help with this. Great information to know. You know what you're getting in for. But again, it's another chance for you to say, oh, that feels comfortable to me. That is a big challenge, but we faced something similar at XYZ Studio where I used to work, and this is how we came about it. Have you done this? What's this doing? Are you using outsourcers for that? And again, it creates that rich, very specific conversation about you in this job. So really good psychologically, good information, and pretty unique questions. And they almost certainly, roughly, probably won't have inadvertently answered them during their part of the interview, the Q&A. So with interviews, there's a lot of prep you can do that's very normal. Look at the CV, look at the interview. Sorry, look at this, look at the job, look at your CV, look at the trailers, look at the games, and so on and so forth. But the things that not everyone does is really helps himself out psychologically, mindset wise, really get that confidence and speak to someone. Speak to a recruiter like myself, speak to one of my competitors, ask them about their best interview tips, look for them online, find whatever it is you need inside yourself to be able to enter that meeting really, really positively, bring that sunny disposition, bring that sort of energy that you want to see in someone that you want to work with, even if you have to fake it, which I understand. But be yourself in interview, all being said, and also come with some really good questions prepped. Avoid any contract questions. Avoid asking about, pay or sick pay or holidays and things like that. If there's a HR interview, that's absolutely appropriate. But if you're talking to the design director, is that the best use of your time with them? And prep those kind of questions. The sort of if you're to offer me this job kind of questions. They're really good. Leads to rich conversation, and it stands you out of the crowd in terms of interview feedback as well. Um, so that's the interview. There's some questions there that you can ask that are more sort of standard, which I won't go through now, but they're on the PDF that you can have a look. So salary, it's a big one. It's very, very varied. We can talk about this probably on a one-to-one basis, but generally speaking, if you don't know the salary band for a role going into it, try and ascertain that information quite early on from the recruiter or from the hiring manager that's recruiting for it. And even if they won't give you a specific number, try and ask for like a broad range. Um, if you are worried about your current salary being low and going for a job that's much higher, is your current salary reflective of the market? We've got some market intelligence that we can send to you, so please reach out if you'd like to see that. But what I would do if I were you is speak to someone that's an objective third party. So speak to a recruiter and say, even if they've not got a job for you, say, would you mind taking a look at my profile and say, roughly, where do you see me on the market in terms of value? Obviously, salary studios will offer different things. There's different level of benefits. If you go to a startup, the salary might not be great, but the back end, shares might be amazing. But if you go to a big AAA company, they might have an okay, might have a much bigger salary and good benefits, but maybe not much in the way of shares or huge bonuses or things like that. So each proposition is a bit different. Try and get a rough idea of where you belong in terms of salary in the market. And if a recruiter asks you salary, don't be afraid of sort of stating what you're looking for and say, I'm ideally looking for XYZ number. If they try and give you some sort of like, is there flexibility on that? Try and understand what their budget is. Say, well, what kind of flexibility are you looking for? And don't be afraid to be honest with them. But at the same time, don't undersell yourself. It's a very tricky subject and it's very unique to each individual. But broadly speaking, have a line in the sand that you won't budge from. Try and give yourself a bit of wiggle room upwards, of course. Try and say, well, I'm ideally looking for this, but I'm flexible to a degree if it's remote or if it's hybrid or whichever, and ask about their benefits as well. And try and get this information as upfront as possible. If they ask about it in interview and put you on the spot, don't feel ashamed to say, I've not thought that through. Can I have a bit of time to answer that? Can I get back to you? That's it's fairly typical. I don't think there'd be any issue with that. But if you really don't know where you are salary wise, reach out to someone like myself or another recruiter and try and get an idea of what you should be worth, and we can give you a fairly accurate sort of rough guide. Follow up. So email on the day later on or the next day or very soon after say, really thanks for meeting. Hope to hear from you soon. Link into the people that you've met. If they say we'll let you know by the end of the week and it's Friday, then drop them a quick message on Friday saying I hope you've had a great week. I know we were hoping to hear back, how are things going at your end, that kind of thing. If you still don't hear, even if you get the dreaded ghosting sort of situation, one final email later on to try and chase it, and just update your tracker to say you didn't hear back. It is annoying, but it's very frequent. It does happen. And I wouldn't really do much beyond that. I think you'd only be sort of beginning to burn bridges if you started doing anything beyond that. If you're not successful, ask for feedback. If it's sort of, good constructive feedback, take it on board, talk about it with someone else. If it's kind of like fundamental to who you are feedback and it's something personal, take it on board and maybe speak to someone about it and see if it is something you can change or something that you can adapt, maybe interview style or the way, sort of disposition or something like that. If it's skill based, there's nothing you can do about it. Your experience is your experience and it's kind of fixed in this moment in time, isn't it? So try not to take that to heart, leave it on a good note, and you never know what might come up there again. So that concludes the talk today.